I never thought I'd be the kind of person writing something like this here, but life has a twisted sense of humor, so here we are. When I first met Daniel, everything felt almost embarrassingly perfect, like something out of those romantic posts people roll their eyes at. We matched at a friend's housewarming party. He was the quiet type, standing off to the side, with a drink he barely touched while everyone else shouted over each other. I liked that he didn't try too hard. I liked that he seemed a little shy, a little awkward, like he wasn't performing for anyone. And when we started talking, it clicked, instantly, as if all the embarrassing dates, all the disappointments, all the maybe I'm just meant to be alone moments had been leading up to him. He listened in a way no one ever had. He remembered tiny details about my life. The name of my childhood dog, the tea I liked, how I always twist my ring when I'm nervous. Within a month I was telling my friends, I think he might be the one. We fell into trust so naturally it scared me. He opened up about his insecurities, his past heartbreaks, and I opened up about mine. Late-night messages turned into sleepovers. Sleepovers turned into weekends away, and soon saying I love you felt less like a confession and more like breathing. I honestly believed we had built something real, solid, vulnerable in the best way. But looking back now, I realize something painful. Sometimes the beginning feels perfect not because everything is true, but because you don't yet know what's missing. It happened on a Wednesday, not a dramatic day. Not a special day, just an ordinary, painfully normal Wednesday. I had gone over to Daniel's apartment to drop off some soup because he told me he wasn't feeling well. He'd left for work earlier than usual, so I figured I'd just put it in the fridge and leave. I wasn't snooping. God, I wish I had been, because then at least I could blame myself, instead of the universe's messed up timing. His laptop was open on the kitchen island, not locked. Not sleeping, just open, screen glowing. A little notification bubble popped up in the corner while I was placing the pot in the fridge. At first, I didn't even read it. I just saw my name, and a sentence that didn't make sense. It was a message from someone I didn't know, a woman, saying my ex. Does she still not know? I froze. You know that horrible moment your heart drops before your brain catches up? That's what it felt like. I walked toward the laptop like it might bite me, and before I could talk myself out of it, I clicked the conversation. I shouldn't have, but I did, and in 2 seconds I fell through a trapdoor I didn't even know existed. The messages were months long, discussions about me, about us, about something Daniel hadn't told me, something big. I stared at the screen, hands shaking so badly I had to grip the counter. It felt like the air thickened around me, like the room was shrinking. There it was, 999. The beginning of the secret I never asked for, never wanted, and would never be able to forget. I wish I could say I reacted decisively, that I slammed the laptop shut, marched out, and never looked back. But that's not what happened. Instead I just stood there, staring at the messages like they were written in some foreign language. My first instinct was denial. There has to be an explanation. Maybe I'm misunderstanding. Maybe this woman is just a friend with a terrible sense of humor. But the pit forming in my stomach told a different story. I kept scrolling. Little pieces of context started snapping together like a puzzle I never asked to solve. I didn't understand the whole secret yet, but it was enough to know that Daniel had been hiding something major. Something he discussed with someone else. A stranger, but not with me. That hurt in a place I didn't even know existed. I felt split in two. Part of me was still the girl who believed he was the one, who remembered every soft moment, every gentle look every time he made me feel safe. The other part was the woman reading those messages, shaking, realizing that the trust she'd been so proud of wasn't real in the way she thought. It was like loving someone and losing them in the same breath. I kept thinking, if he lied about this, what else is there? How long has he been choosing silence over honesty? Am I stupid for not seeing it? The worst part was that even in the middle of the shock, I missed him. I wanted him to walk through that door, take one look at me and say, "Please let me explain." I wanted to believe him, and I hated that I still wanted to believe him. That internal tug of war was tearing me apart. Love pulling on one side, disappointment and fear on the other, and for the first time since we met I didn't know which side of me would win. I didn't plan the confrontation. I didn't rehearse what to say. I didn't even have time to breathe properly before it all happened. Daniel came home earlier than expected. I was still standing in the kitchen, laptop open like a wound. When he walked in and saw me there, his face went pale in a way I'd never seen before. Not the "oh no, she's mad" kind of pale, the "I've just been caught" kind. "Hey, you're here," he said, voice tight. I didn't answer. I just tilted the laptop toward him. He froze. For a full 10 seconds, he didn't move, didn't blink. I could hear the clock ticking behind us, way too loud. "Can you explain this?" My voice cracked on the last word. I hated that it did. He swallowed hard. "You weren't supposed to see that." Wrong answer. Not. It's not what it looks like. Not. Let me explain. Just a quiet acknowledgement that yes, he had been hiding something. "What does that even mean?" I asked. Why is someone asking if I still don't know? What don't I know? Chumzu. What don't I know? Daniel. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing like he needed to outrun the conversation. "I was going to tell you. I swear. I didn't know how." My chest tightened. "Tell me what?" He looked at me with this expression. Guilt, fear, shame, all tangled together. "I should have told you from the beginning," he said softly, "but I was afraid if you knew you'd leave." The words felt like a punch. "So instead you lied?" I asked. For months, he didn't deny it. He just whispered yes. I felt something inside me crack. A small frightening sound in the back of my heart. Trust doesn't usually break with a dramatic explosion. Sometimes it just splits quietly, right down the seam. After he admitted that yes, he had kept something from me on purpose, the air between us changed. It wasn't a fight, and it wasn't silence. It was something heavier, something that settled over the room like dust after an explosion. I remember stepping back from him, not physically far, but enough that he noticed, enough that he flinched. "Can you please just tell me what it is?" I said. "I can't keep guessing. I can't keep filling in blanks you created." He nodded, but he didn't speak, not right away. And that hesitation, that pause, did something irreversible to the way I saw him. Before that moment, I saw Daniel as someone who would always run toward me. But in that pause, I realized he was capable of running away too. He finally told me the truth, or enough of it to confirm the messages weren't innocent, weren't misunderstood, weren't anything I could easily forgive. And once the words were out, our relationship shifted instantly. It wasn't the same. He wasn't the same, or maybe he was, and I was just seeing him clearly for the first time. He tried to come closer, but I stepped back again without meaning to. He tried to touch my hand, but I pulled it away, not because I wanted to, because my body physically rejected the idea of pretending everything was okay, and I could see it in his face. The moment he realized something between us had cracked in a way he couldn't patch up with apologies. For the rest of the evening, we barely spoke. He sat on the edge of the couch, hunched forward like the weight of the truth was pressing down on him. I stood by the window, arms crossed, trying to hold myself together. The irony is that nothing dramatic happened. No yelling, no broken plates, no slamming doors. But the quiet was far worse, because that's when the consequences started to show, minus a distance that didn't exist before, a softness that had been replaced by caution, a certainty that had turned into doubt. It was the first night I realized we might not make it out of this. That night, after I went home, sleep didn't even bother trying to find me. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our relationship like it was footage I needed to analyze for clues I had missed. I kept asking myself the same question over and over. Unacquainted someone who claimed to love me hide something so big. I tried to rationalize it, tried to remind myself that people make mistakes, that fear can make even good people do stupid things, that vulnerability isn't always clean or honest. But every time I landed on something empathetic, I think of the messages I saw. The ones where he talked to someone else about me, about what he hadn't told me, about how long he'd gone without being honest, and the sympathy would evaporate. I dug through the entire year of our relationship in my mind. That one time he got weirdly tense when I asked about a part of his past, the phone calls he took in a different room, the way he sometimes looked at me like he wanted to say something but swallowed it down instead. At the time, chalked it up to his introversion, to his emotional scars, to being patient with someone who didn't open up as easily as I did. But now, every memory felt suspicious, tainted, questionable. I tried to understand why he didn't tell me. Was it shame, fear of losing me, or was it because I was never the person he felt safe being honest with in the first place? That last possibility hurt the most. I even considered messaging the woman from the chat, the one who asked if I still didn't know. But just the thought made me nauseous. I wasn't ready to hear her version of the story. Not yet. Instead, I spent the early hours of the morning wondering whether love could survive a truth that was buried on purpose, or whether the burying itself was the real unforgivable part. All I knew was that the ground under me didn't feel stable anymore. Every step felt like walking across cracked ice, and I still didn't know whether it could hold. The next day, I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out the inside of my chest and left me with an echo, instead of a heartbeat. I knew I had to see Daniel again, not to fix anything, but to decide whether there was anything left to save. When I arrived at his place, he looked like he hadn't slept either. His eyes were red, shoulders tense, like he'd been bracing for the impact of my decision long before I even made it. We sat across from each other, a coffee table between us that suddenly felt like a barricade. "I don't want to lose you," he said quietly, voice cracking. "I know I messed this up. I know I should have told you. I was scared." I nodded. Part of me believed him, the part that remembered how gentle he could be, how soft his voice sounded when he told me he loved me. But another part of me kept repeating, "I next say, if he was scared, why wasn't he scared of hurting me?" "I need to know something," I said. "If I hadn't found out by accident, would you have ever told me?" He hesitated, and that was my answer. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even shocked anymore. I just felt tired. I took a long breath, and the words came out before I fully processed them. "I can't stay with someone I have to doubt. I can forgive a mistake, but not a secret that long. Not one you chose over honesty." His face crumpled, and for a moment I almost took it back. Almost. But staying out of guilt isn't love. Staying out of fear isn't loyalty. I said slowly, "we need time. Apart, maybe for good." He tried to speak, to reach for me, but I stood up before he could. Walking out felt like peeling off a part of myself, but staying would have meant losing myself entirely. So that's what I chose, Matt. Not him, not the relationship. Me. Weeks passed. I moved through them in a strange haze, part relief, part grief. There were moments I almost reached for my phone to text him, to ask questions I didn't really want answers to. And there were nights I woke up, heart pounding, wondering if I had made the wrong choice. Forgiveness is tricky. I've realized it's not always about reconciling with the person who hurt you. Sometimes it's about reconciling with yourself, acknowledging that you are allowed to set boundaries, to protect your heart, to refuse to be complicit in your own pain. I tried to understand Daniel, to put myself in his shoes. Fear is a powerful thing, and sometimes it warps the way people act. Saying us, but understanding doesn't mean excusing. Understanding doesn't erase the secret, the betrayal, or the months of uncertainty he caused me. I've thought a lot about what forgiveness actually means. For me, it means letting go of anger without letting go of my standards. It means being able to remember him, without being consumed by the sting of what he did. It means giving myself permission to move on, and to trust again, when I'm ready, with someone who will honor that trust. I don't know if Daniel will ever truly understand the weight of what he hid, and maybe that's okay. I don't need him to. What I do need is to acknowledge the lesson. Love without honesty is a house built on sand, and I've spent enough time rebuilding my own foundations to know what I deserve. Even after I made the decision to walk away, doubt didn't leave me. It lingered like a shadow I couldn't shake. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped, half expecting it to be him reaching out. Every familiar street, every song we loved, every little habit we shared, they pulled me back into memories I didn't want to relive. I found myself questioning everything about the past year. Was our love real? Did he ever really care? Or was it all a carefully constructed illusion? A performance designed to keep me close while he hid the truth. And yet, deep down I knew the answer. The moments we shared, the laughter, the late night talks, the small acts of tenderness, they were real. That part of our relationship existed. But the trust, that part was fractured beyond repair. Trust isn't something you can stitch back together once it's been deliberately cut. I tried to separate the man I loved from the man who hid things from me. The former deserved compassion, the latter deserved accountability, and I deserved clarity, not confusion. So I journaled. I walked in the park alone. I let myself feel the anger, the sadness, the betrayal, every emotion without judgment. I realized that ignoring it wouldn't help. Suppressing it wouldn't make it disappear. I had to face it head-on if I wanted to heal. And slowly, in those quiet moments I began to feel a flicker of something I hadn't felt in weeks, a sense of control, a sense that even if love could fail me, I could still honor myself. By the time a month had passed, I started noticing the small changes in myself. The first time I cooked dinner without thinking of him, I felt a tiny surge of independence. The first weekend I spent alone, I realized I didn't need someone else's presence to feel whole. I began imagining a life beyond the shadow of that secret, and for the first time in weeks, it felt possible. Not because I had stopped loving him, that love lingered stubbornly, like a song you can't turn off, but because I was learning that love doesn't have to define your worth. I started reconnecting with friends I'd neglected, painting again, writing late into the night. I even made small plans for the future, trips I wanted to take, new experiences I wanted to have. For the first time I was planning for myself, not for a we that no longer existed. There were moments of longing, of course, times I'd catch a glimpse of someone who reminded me of him, or hear a song we'd loved, and my chest would tighten. But the difference now was that I didn't panic. I allowed myself to feel, to mourn, to remember, but I didn't let it dictate my choices. I realized that moving on doesn't mean erasing the past. It means learning to live with it without letting it control you. And slowly I was beginning to breathe again. Rebuilding trust was harder than I expected. Not trust in Daniel, that was gone forever, but trust in people, in my own judgment, in my ability to read hearts without being naive. I realized I had to relearn how to believe in someone without surrendering my entire sense of self. Every new connection, every small friendship, felt like a test. Could I open my heart without fear? Could I speak my truth without worrying it would be used against me? I started setting boundaries more clearly. I stopped glossing over red flags, even tiny ones, and instead asked myself hard questions. Does this feel safe? Does this respect me? Am I truly seen? And it wasn't just about others. I had to trust myself again. My instincts, my decisions, my worth. There were days when I doubted myself, when I wondered if I'd overreacted or been too harsh. But over time, the answers became clearer. Self-respect isn't negotiable, and honesty isn't optional. It was a slow process. Some days I felt like I was taking 2 steps forward, and 1 step back. Some nights I cried, replaying the betrayal. But gradually, I felt a resilience forming, a quiet confidence, that if someone hid a part of themselves from me, I could see it, face it, and choose my response without losing myself. By the end of this phase, I wasn't just healing from Daniel's secret, I was rebuilding a foundation of trust that could carry me into healthier, more honest relationships with others, and most importantly, with myself. As the weeks turned into months, I began to understand something vital. My self-worth was never tied to someone else's choices. Daniel's secret didn't make me weak, and it didn't make me unlovable. It simply revealed the limits of our compatibility and the boundaries I was willing to enforce. I started defining those boundaries more clearly, with myself and with anyone I allowed into my life. I realized that love is not about blind forgiveness or enduring secrecy. It's about mutual respect, transparency, and a willingness to honor each other's trust. Anything less is not love. It's compromise at the expense of your own well-being. Writing these reflections down became almost therapeutic. I journaled about what I wanted in a partner, what I would never tolerate again, and how I could nurture relationships without losing myself. I found strength in naming the lessons I had learned. Honesty is non-negotiable. Fear cannot justify secrecy. Self-respect must always come first. And slowly I noticed a shift in my mindset. I wasn't angry all the time. I wasn't obsessed with what could have been. Instead, I was calmer, more deliberate, and more attuned to my own needs. I understood that forgiving Daniel didn't mean taking him back. Forgiving him meant reclaiming my peace. I realized that protecting my heart was not selfish. It was necessary. By this point, I had begun to imagine what love could look like in the future. Not a fantasy, not a fairy tale, but something real, grounded, and healthy. I realized I didn't want to erase Daniel from my life completely. I wanted to carry the lessons with me, so that the next time I opened my heart, I could do it without fear or compromise. I pictured a relationship where honesty wasn't optional, where vulnerability was met with care instead of judgment, and where trust wasn't something constantly questioned. I wanted someone who could love me without hiding, and someone I could love without doubting. It was strange, even comforting, to think that these ideals weren't out of reach. They were just farther away than I had thought, farther than Daniel, farther than that messy chapter of my life. But they existed, and knowing that gave me hope. I also realized that this vision of love wasn't about waiting for the perfect person or holding out for an ideal. It was about knowing my own worth, understanding my limits, and refusing to settle for anything less than respect, honesty, and emotional integrity. For the first time in a long time, the future felt like a canvas I could paint, not a cage I had to escape. And in that realization, I felt a quiet strength, the kind that only comes from surviving heartbreak, facing betrayal, and choosing yourself. I didn't need one last confrontation with Daniel, and I didn't seek one. The closure I needed wasn't in his words, it was in my own. I sat alone one evening, notebook in hand, and wrote him a letter I never intended to send. Every word was honest. Every feeling, every hurt, every reflection. I told him about the love I had felt, the trust that was broken, and the lessons I had learned. I allowed myself to express the anger, the sadness, and even the lingering affection without guilt. It wasn't about blaming him anymore. It was about reclaiming my story. When I finished, I folded the paper and set it aside. I didn't need him to read it. I didn't need his apology to feel validated. I realized that closure isn't about the other person. It's about deciding that you will no longer carry the weight of someone else's mistakes. For the first time in weeks, I felt lighter. The anxiety, the doubt, the turmoil, it didn't vanish completely, but it felt manageable. I had faced the betrayal, endured the heartbreak, and emerged on the other side with clarity. It wasn't a perfect ending. There were no fireworks, no dramatic goodbye, just a quiet understanding. Some love isn't meant to last, but it can still teach you how to survive, how to grow, and how to protect your heart. Months have passed since I walked away, and the weight of that secret no longer defines me. I've learned that forgiveness isn't about excusing someone else's actions. It's about freeing yourself from the grip of their choices. I can remember Daniel without pain consuming me, and I can acknowledge the love we shared without letting it blind me to the truth. I've rebuilt my boundaries, strengthened my self-respect, and cultivated a sense of trust in myself that no one can shake. I know now that love without honesty is a risk I won't take again, and that protecting my heart is not selfish, it's necessary. Life feels quieter, yes, but also fuller. I've begun to trust in the possibility of a love that is both real and safe, without fear or deception. And while the memory of betrayal will always be part of my story, it no longer dictates my path. I'm still learning, still growing, still healing, but I carry a new certainty. I am worth honesty. I am worth respect. I am worth a love that doesn't hide in the shadows. And that knowledge, that quiet, steadfast knowledge, is enough to move forward.